All right, it is Monday, May 4th, our last week of school, and we never got around to this book, which is perpetually at the top of my favorite books ever. No, it is not fiction, but I hesitate to say how impactful it has been for me because I don't want to oversell it. I'd rather just, I would prefer just to have been reading this with you for the last month rather than doing socially distanced Zoom classes and focusing on Frankenstein, all of which we needed to do, but I would much rather have been doing this with you all. Because frankly, it holds in it a way to come full circle. Not that we can't otherwise, but this lets us sort of make another big loop and come full circle. Yeah, so I was talking with Sophie, and Sophie said that she would be more likely to read it and feel comfortable reading it herself if I would read along, or if I would make videos so she could read along. So I suppose, Sophie, this is for you, for nobody else. And I would love to hear your thoughts, whether we do it as semi-organized summer book club or whether we do it by message or whatever. Anyway, I'm going to read a few chapters a day, just until I get tired of reading. A word of warning, there's a ton of ancient Greek in here, and I don't even know how to appropriately pronounce modern Greek. So I'm going to do my best with the transliterations of the ancient Greek into modern English letters. June, hey, no. But don't take my pronunciation for it. If it's wrong and later in future in college or something, you just say some of these words and they're inaccurate, my apologies ahead of time. Don't hold it against me forever. And I'm not going to preamble anymore, except to say, like, I'm happy to do this. I'm going to start with a preface. It's on Roman numeral page 11, which is XI. I know we struggle with those all year long. Anyway, the preface. Kafka's The Top is a story about a philosopher who spends his spare time around children so he can grab their tops in spin. To catch a top still spinning makes him happy for a moment in his belief that the understanding of any detail, that of a spinning top, for instance, was sufficient for the understanding of all things. End quote. Disgust follows delight almost at once, and he throws down the top, walks away. Yet hope of understanding continues to fill him each time top-spinning preparations begin among the children. Quote, as soon as the top began to spin, and he was running breathlessly after it, the hope would turn to certainty. But when he held the silly piece of wood in his hand, he felt nauseated. End quote. The story is about the delight we take in metaphor. A meaning spins, remaining upright on an axis of normalcy, aligned with the conventions of connotation and denotation. And yet, the spin is not normal. And to dissemble normal uprightness by means of this fantastic motion is impertinence. What is the relation of impertinence to the hope of understanding, to delight? The story concerns the reason why we love to fall in love. Beauty spins and the mind moves. To catch beauty would be to understand how that impertinent stability in vertigo is possible. But no, delight need not reach so far. To be running breathlessly, but not yet arrived, is itself delightful, a suspended moment of living hope. Suppression of impertinence is not the lover's aim, nor can I believe this philosopher really runs after understanding. Rather, he's become a philosopher, that is, one whose profession is to delight in understanding, in order to furnish himself with pretext for running after tops. Bittersweet, chapter 1. It was Sappho who first called Eros bittersweet. No one who has been in love disputes her. What does the word mean? Eros seemed to Sappho at once an experience of pleasure and pain. Here is contradiction and perhaps paradox. To perceive this Eros can split the mind in two. Why? The components of the contradiction may seem, at first glance, obvious. We take for granted, as did Sappho, the sweetness of erotic desire. Its pleasurability smiles out at us. But the bitterness is less obvious. There might be several reasons why what is sweet should also be bitter. There may be various relations between the two savors. Poets have sorted the matter out in different ways. Sappho's own formulation is a good place to begin tracing the possibilities. The relevant fragment runs. Eros, once again limb loosener, whirls me sweet bitter, impossible to fight off, creature stealing up. It is hard to translate. Sweet bitter sounds wrong, and yet our standard English rendering bittersweet inverts the actual terms of Sappho's compound, lupupikron. Should that concern us? If her ordering has a descriptive intention, Eros is here being said to bring sweetness, then bitterness in sequence. She is sorting the possibilities chronologically. Many a lover's experience would validate such a chronology, especially in poetry, where most love ends badly. But it is unlikely that this is what Sappho means. Her poem begins with a dramatic localization of the erotic situation in time, and fixes the erotic attention and fixes the erotic action in the present indicative tense. She is not recording the history of a love affair, but the instant of desire. One moment staggers under pressure of Eros. One mental state splits. A simultaneity of pleasure and pain is at issue. The pleasant aspect is named first, we may presume, because it is less surprising. Emphasis is thrown upon the problematic other side of the phenomenon, whose attributes advance in a hail of soft consonants. Eros moves or creeps upon its victim from somewhere outside her, or paten. No battle avails to fight off that advance. A macanon. I'm sure that was wrong. Desire then is neither inhabitant nor ally of the desirer. Foreign to her will, it forces itself irresistibly upon her from without. Eros is an enemy. Its bitterness must be the taste of enmity. That would be hate. To love one's friends and hate one's enemies is a standard archaic prescription for moral response. Love and hate construct between them the machinery of human contact. Love and hate construct between them the machinery of human contacts. Does it make sense to locate both poles of this affect within a single emotional level? I'm going to reread that. Does it make sense to locate both poles of this affect within the single emotional event of Eros? Presumably, yes, if friend and enemy converge in the being who is its occasion. The convergence relates creates a paradox, but one that is almost a cliche for the modern literary imagination. And hate begins where love leaves off, whispers Anna Karenina as she heads for Moscow Station, and an end to the dilemma of desire. In fact, erotic paradox is a problem antedating Eros himself. We find it first enacted on the wall of Troy in a scene between Helen and Aphrodite. The interchange is as sharp as a paradigm. Homer shows us Helen, embodiment of desire, fed up with the impositions of Eros and defying an order from Aphrodite to serve Paris's bed. The goddess of love responds angrily, wielding erotic paradox as a weapon. Damn you, woman, don't provoke me. I'll get angry and let you drop. I'll come to hate you as terribly as I now love you. Helen obeys at once. Love and hate in combination make an irresistible enemy. The simultaneity of bitter and sweet that startles us in Sappho's adjective glycopikron is differently rendered in Homer's poem. Epic convention represents inner states of feeling in dynamic and linear enactment, so that a divided mind may be read from a sequence of antithetical actions. Homer and Sappho concur, however, in presenting the divinity of desire as an ambivalent being, at once friend and enemy, who informs the erotic experience with emotional paradox. Eros appears in other genres and poets too as a paradox of love and hate. Aristophanes, for example, tells us that the seductive young libertine Alcibiades was able to inspire a feeling like lover's passion in the Greek demos. For they love him and they hate him and they long to possess him. In Aeschylus's Agamemnon, Menelaus is described wandering about his empty palace after the departure of Helen. The rooms seem haunted by her. At their bedchamber he stops and cries out for ruts of love in the bed. There is no question it is desire he feels, yet hate seeps in to fill the void. Because of his longing for something gone across the sea, a phantom seems to rule the rooms, and the grace of statues shaped in beauty comes to be an object of hate for the man. In the absences of eyes, all Aphrodite is vacant, gone. Love and hate furnish a subject for the Hellenistic epigram as well. Nicarchus's injunction to his beloved is typical. If you love me, you hate me. And if you hate me, you love me. Now, if you don't hate me, beloved, you don't love me. Now, if you don't hate me, beloved, don't love me. Catullus's epigram is perhaps the most elegant distillate we have of this cliché. I hate and I love. Why, you might ask? I don't know, but I feel it happening and I hurt. The poets of the Greek lyric tradition sometimes conceptualize the erotic condition as starkly as this. But Sappho and her successors in general prefer physiology to concepts. The moment when the soul parts on itself in desire is conceived as a dilemma of body and senses. On Sappho's tongue, as we've seen, it is a moment bitter and sweet. The ambivalent taste is developed in later poets into bitter honey, sweet wound, and Eros of sweet tears. Eros knocks a lover flat with the shock of hot and cold in Anacreon's poem. With this huge hammer, again, Eros knocked me like a blacksmith and doused me in a wintry ditch. While Sophocles compares the experience to a lump of ice melting in warm hands. Later poets mix the sensations of hot and cold with the metaphor from taste to concoct sweet fire, lovers burned by honey, erotic missiles tempered in honey. Ibycos frames Eros in a paradox of wet and dry, where the black thunderstorm of desire drives against him not rain, but parching madnesses. These tropes may have some basis in ancient theories of physiology and psychology, which associate action that is pleasurable, desirable, or good with sensations of heat, liquidity, melting, and action that is unpleasant or hateful with cold, freezing, rigidification. But no simple map of the emotions is available here. Desire is not simple. In Greek, the act of love is a mingling, and desire melts the limbs. Boundaries of body, categories of thought, are confounded. The god who melts limbs proceeds to break the lover, as would a foe on the epic battlefield. O comrade, the limb loosener crushes me. Desire. The shape of love and hate is perceptible then in a variety of sensational crises. Each crisis calls for decision and action, but decision is impossible and action a paradox when Eros stirs the senses. Everyday life can become difficult. The poets speak of the consequences for behavior and judgment. I don't know what I should do. Two states of mind in me. Sappho says and breaks off. I'm in love, I'm not in love. I'm crazy, I'm not crazy, cries Anacreon. When I look at Diathantos, new shoot among the young men, I can neither fly nor stray. Desire keeps pulling the lever to act and not to act, is the conclusion of Sophocles. Not only action founders, moral evaluation also fractures under the pressure of paradox, splitting desire into a thing good and bad at the same time. The Eros of Euripides wields a bow that is double in its effect, for it can bring on a lovely life or complete collapse. Euripides goes so far as to double the god of love himself. Twin Erotes appear in a fragment of his lost play, Stenobia. One of them guides the lover in a life of virtue. The other is a lover's worst enemy and leads him straight to the house of death. Love and hate bifurcate Eros. Let us return to the question with which we began, namely, the meaning of Sappho's adjective glucopikron. A contour has been emerging from our examination of the poetic texts. Sweet bitter Eros is what hits the raw film of the lover's mind. Paradox is what takes shape on the sensitized plate of the poem, a negative image from which positive pictures can be created. Whether apprehended as a dilemma of sensation, action, or value, Eros prints as the same contradictory fact. Love and hate converge within erotic desire. Why? Chapter 3. Chapter 2. Go on. Perhaps there are many ways to answer this. One comes clearest in Greek. The Greek word eros denotes want, lack, desire for that which is missing. The lover wants what he does not have. It is by definition impossible for him to have what he wants if, as soon as it is had, it is no longer wanting. This is more than wordplay. There is a dilemma within Eros that has been thought crucial by thinkers from Sappho to the present day. Plato turns and returns to it. 4 of his dialogues explore what it means to say that desire can only be for what is lacking, not at hand, not present, not in one's possession or in one's being. Eros entails in dia. As Diotima puts it in the Symposium, Eros is a bastard got by wealth on poverty and ever at home in a life of want. Hunger is the analog chosen by Simone Weil for this conundrum. All our desires are contradictory, like the desire for food. I want the person I love to love me. If he is, however, totally devoted to me, he does not exist any longer, and I cease to love him. And as long as he is not totally devoted to me, he does not love me enough. Hunger and repletion. Emily Dickinson puts the case more pertly in I Had Been Hungry. So I found that hunger was a way of persons outside windows that entering takes away. Petrarch interprets the problem in terms of the ancient physiology of fire and ice. I know to follow while I flee my fire, I know to follow while I flee my fire, I freeze when present. When absent, hot is my desire. Sartre has less patience with the contradictory ideal of desire, this dupery. He sees in erotic relations a system of infinite reflections, a deceiving mirror game that carries within itself its own frustration. For Simone de Beauvoir, the game is torture. The knight departing for new adventures offends his lady, yet she has nothing but contempt for him if he remains at her feet. This is the torture of impossible love. Jacques Lacan puts the matter somewhat more enigmatically when he says, desire evokes lack of being under the 3 figures of the nothing that constitutes the basis of the demand for love, of the hate that even denies the other's being, and of the unspeakable element in that which is ignored in its request. It would seem that these various voices are pursuing a common perception. All human desire is poised on an axis of paradox. Absence and presence its poles. Love and hate its motive energies. Let us return once more to the poem of Sappho with which we began. This fragment, as it is preserved in the text and scholia of Hephaestion, has followed without a break by 2 lines in the same meter, which may be from the same poem. Attis, your care for me stirred hatred in you, and you flew to Andromeda. Whoever desires what is gone? No one. The Greeks were clear on this. They invented Eros to express it. Ruse. Chapter 3. Let no one enter here who is ignorant of geometry. The inscription over the door of Plato's Academy. There is something pure and indubitable about the notion that Eros is lack. Moreover, it is a notion that, once adopted, has a powerful effect on one's habits and representations of love. We can see this most clearly in an example. Consider Sappho's fragment 31, which is one of the best-known love poems in our tradition. He seems to me equal to gods, that man who opposite you sits and listens close to your sweet speaking and lovely laughing. Oh, it puts the heart in my chest on wings. When I look at you a moment, then no speaking is left in me. No. Tongue breaks, and thin fire is racing under skin, and in eyes no sight, and drumming fills ears, and cold sweat holds me, and shaking grips me all. Greener than grass, I am and dead, or almost, I seem to me. The poem floats toward us on a stage set, but we have no program. The actors go in and out of focus anonymously. The action has no location. We don't know why the girl is laughing, nor what she feels about this man. He looms beyond the footlights, somewhere more than mortal in line 1, and dissolves at line 2 into a pronoun so indefinite that scholars cannot agree on what it means. The poet who is staging the mise-en-scene steps mysteriously from the wings of a relative clause at line 5 and takes over the action. It is not a poem about the 3 of them as individuals, but about the geometrical figure formed by their perception of one another, and the gaps in that perception. It is an image of the distances between them. Thin lines of force coordinate the 3 of them. Along one line travels the girl's voice and laughter to a man who listens closely. A second tangent connects the girl to the poet. Between the eye of the poet and the listening man crackles a third current. The figure is a triangle. Why? An obvious answer is to say that this is a poem about jealousy. Numbers of critics have done so. Yet just as many readers deny that there is any hint of jealousy here. How is such blanket disagreement possible? Are we all operating with the same idea of what jealousy is? The word jealousy comes from the Greek zelos, meaning zeal or fervent pursuit. It is a hot and corrosive spiritual motion arising in fear and fed on resentment. The jealous lover fears that his beloved prefers someone else and resents any relationship between the beloved and another. This is an emotion concerned with placement and displacement. The jealous lover covets a particular place in the beloved's affection and is full of anxiety that another will take it. Here is an image of the shifting pattern that is jealousy from more modern times. During the first half of the 15th century, a type of slow pacing dance called the bassa danza became popular in Italy. These dances were semi-dramatic and transparently expressive of psychological relationships. In the dance called jealousy, 3 men and 3 women permute partners, and each man goes through a stage of standing by himself apart from the others. Jealousy is a dance in which everyone moves, for it is the instability of the emotional situation that preys upon a jealous lover's mind. No such permutations jeopardize Sappho in fragment 31. Indeed, her case is the reverse. Were she to change places with the man who listens closely, it seems likely she would be entirely destroyed. She does not covet the man's place, nor fear usurpation of her own. She directs no resentment at him. She is simply amazed at his intrepidity. This man's role in the poetic structure reflects that of jealousy within Sappho's feelings. Neither is named. It is the beloved's beauty that affects Sappho. The man's presence is somehow necessary to delineation of that emotional event. It remains to be seen how. Lovers all show such symptoms as these, says Longinus, an ancient critic to whom we owe preservation of Sappho's text. Jealousy may be implicit in the symptoms of love whenever they occur, but jealousy does not explain the geometry of this poem. Another popular theory about fragment 31 is the rhetorical theory, which explains the man who listens closely as a poetic necessity. That is, he is not to be thought of as a real person, but as a poetic hypothesis, designed to show by contrast how deeply Sappho is affected in the presence of her beloved. As such, he is a cliché of erotic poetry, for it is a common rhetorical maneuver to praise one's beloved by saying, "He must be made of stone who could resist you." Pindar, for example, in a well-known fragment, contrasts his own response to a beautiful boy. "I melt like wax as the heat bites into it," with that of an impassible observer, whose black heart was forged of adamant or iron in a cold flame. The rhetorical point may be reinforced by adding a comparison with divine impassivity, as in the Hellenistic epigram that says, "If you looked upon my beloved and were not broken by desire, you are totally God or totally stone." With this contrastive technique, the lover praises his beloved and incidentally begs sympathy for his own suit by aligning himself with normal human response. It would be an unnatural heart or supernatural heart that failed to be moved by desire for such an object. Is this what Sappho is doing in fragment 31? No. In the first place, the register of normality is missing from Sappho's poem. Her record of erotic emotion is singular. We may recognize her symptoms from personal memory, but it is impossible to believe she is representing herself as an ordinary lover. Moreover, praise of the beloved does not stand out as the principal purpose of this poem. The girl's voice and laughter are a significant provocation, but she disappears at line 5, and Sappho's own body and mind are the unmistakable subject of all that follows. Praise and normal erotic responses are not things that occur in the real world. Praise and normal erotic responses are things that occur in the real world. This poem does not. Sappho tells us twice, emphatically, the real location of her poem. He seems to me. I seem to me. This is a disquisition on seeming, and it takes place entirely within her own mind. Jealousy is beside the point. The normal world of erotic responses is beside the point. Praise is beside the point. It is a poem about the lover's mind in the act of constructing desire for itself. Sappho's subject is Eros as it appears to her. She makes no claim beyond that. A single consciousness represents itself. One mental state is exposed to view. We see clearly what shape desire has there. A three-point circuit is visible within Sappho's mind. The man who listens closely is no sentimental cliche or rhetorical device. He is a cognitive and intentional necessity. Sappho perceives desire by identifying it as a three-part structure. We may, in the traditional terminology of erotic theorizing, refer to this structure as a love triangle, and we may be tempted, with post-romantic asperity, to dismiss it as a ruse. But the ruse of the triangle is not a trivial mental maneuver. We see in it the radical constitution of desire. Or where Eros is lack, its activation calls for three structural components: lover, beloved, and that which comes between them. They are 3 points of transformation on a circuit of possible relationship, electrified by desire so that they touch, not touching. Conjoined, they are held apart. The third component plays a paradoxical role, for it both connects and separates, marking that two are not one, irradiating the absence whose presence is demanded by Eros. When the circuit points connect, perception leaps, and something becomes visible on the triangular path where volts are moving that would not be visible without the three-part structure. The difference between what is and what could be is visible. The ideal is projected on a screen of the actual in a kind of stereoscopy. The man sits like a god. The poet almost dies. Two poles of response within the same desiring mind. Triangulation makes both present at once by a shift of distance, replacing erotic action with a ruse of heart and language. For in this dance, the people do not move. Desire moves. Eros is a verb. I want to keep reading, but the next chapter is long-ish. I mean, it's not long. It's 7 pages. That's okay. I'm going to stop now. Appropriately, I'm going to stop now. If I kept reading just because I want to, it would rob you of all kinds of time to think. Maybe jump in again just a little bit. Maybe there would be no more desire to keep going. So, stopping. We're in setup mode still. This is all set up. Like drawing the map that will be like exploring as we think about these ideas. We're laying out the concepts and how they, and beginning to explain how they connect to one another. And like all metaphors. So fun. Okay, more soon.